Let's just focus on to this now. It is deemed as one of the most profound speeches by the former president, Thabo Mbeki, delivered in the National Assembly on the 8th of May in 1996, with extracts of the speech published on the 18th of June in 2011 in commemoration of Mbeki's birthday, which he in fact celebrates today, turning 80 years old. A very happy birthday to him. Mbeki's widely circulated "I Am an African" speech was declared a beacon of hope for a South Africa that was still in its infancy stages of democracy, an encouraging plight of a reimagined South Africa that sought to see restorative justice and equal progression of all races. Mbeki delivered the speech 2 years after the country's first democratic elections back in 1994, and on that day of the adoption of the Constitution. So, 26 years later, how far have we come as a country and a continent? We're joined by cultural expert, poet and writer Writer Pitika Ntuli to help us make sense of this. A very good morning to you, Babu Ntuli. Thank you very much for availing yourself this morning. Some would very well argue that this was a prophetic and quite poetic piece of work. If we go to the stanza that reads, "I owe my being to the koi and the sand whose desolate souls haunt the great expanses of the beautiful Cape. They who fell victim of the most merciless genocide our native land has ever seen. They who were the first to lose their lives in the struggle to defend our freedom and independence, and they who as a people perished as a result." One King Khoisan has for the past 3 years or so staged a protest outside the union buildings calling for a number of things, recognition being among those. How have we fared as a country when it comes to these people that the former president says he owes his being to?
Happy birthday to former president. His speech was absolutely very riveting, very poetic. It gave us a lot of hope that under his leadership and a new South Africa, we are going to be indeed an African people. But alas, the opposite seems to be the very things. The very Khoisan people we are talking about, they are still without their land. That's why that one man is still standing in front of whatever place he is, crying, for justice. So we have actually regressed. In fact, we have not even regressed. We have actually betrayed the very dreams that we originally, had. We had a very clear, our founding fathers and mothers had very clear idea when they came up with the reconstruction and development project, because it was programmatic. It spelled out what was to be reconstructed, if it is culture, if it is education, if it is economy, if it is whatever. The things were just right there, for us to take. Instead, we came up with the TRC, and the TRC was meant to get us to get to the bottom of apartheid as to what has happened, how much people have suffered, so that out of that, some reparations can come to those people that suffered. That was also aborted, just like the RDP, in favor of foreign direct investment, where you cannot talk truly about being African in that sense. And then we go further to say that the very RDP was calling on the question of land distribution, restorative justice, and all of these things. But instead, we are now languishing in absolute greed and corruption that's running around. Monies are flying all over the place, while up at the bottom we are suffering. The speech was beautiful. It was prophesying something that might yet come in the future. So I think we should actually keep it on, so that when we recover, from this quagmire in which we are sinking, it's very clear. To me, that to have over 70 youth unemployed in any country doesn't portend very well for anyone. to drop from the poll stations to about 40% of people turning actually their back. What signs are we actually being given? We are given signs that dissatisfaction may not just remain under the surface of society. People are not going to be quiet yet.
He also notes in the speech back then that the victims parade with no mask to hide the brutish reality, the beggars, the prostitutes, the street children, those who seek solace in substance abuse, those who have to steal to assuage hunger, those who have to lose their sanity, because to be sane is to invite pain. He also then says, I have seen the corruption of minds and souls in the pursuit of an ignoble effort to perpetrate a veritable crime against humanity. With what you have said, where the majority of South Africans, or what the majority of South Africans experience, can we call what is happening today a crime against humanity?
It is a crime against humanity. We are a very significant part of that the humanity. That particular part of the speech speak exactly on what is happening in our streets today. I don't know why his own party does not actually listen to him. We need to revisit this. I have, at least personally, on a number of other issues, called on top intellectuals and politicians to say, let's have a national dialogue. But I think people in power don't want dialogue. We need a national dialogue to honestly say, where did we go wrong and how can we go right? But as long as we are not controlled by ourselves, and we are controlled by other forces outside ourselves that we listen to more than we listen actually to the people, then we are going to go the way in which all other countries went with all the promises and then decline into a decrepitude of poverty, crime, violence, riots, and the rest of that. Because as things happen now, wherever you turn, I was on a plane going to Cape Town, last week. A man I do not know just came and looked at me in the eye and said, what are we going to do about this country of ours for which we have died so much and sacrificed so much? A decent person, and then he walked away. And I wasn't in government, I was stunned. Now you can tell, therefore, that there is a lot of hate. There is a lot of disappointment. Our people feel betrayed, utterly.
In the speech, he also says, I am an African. I am born of the people of the continent of Africa. The pain of the violent conflict that the peoples of Liberia, Somalia, the Sudan, Burundi, and Algeria is a pain I also bear. The dismal shame of poverty, suffering, and human degradation of my continent is a blight that we share. He also, though, towards the end says, whatever the setbacks of the moment, nothing can stop us now. Whatever the difficulties, Africa shall be at peace. However improbable it may sound to the skeptics, Africa will prosper. It is often said that the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. If we take a look at past behavior on this continent, can we hold on to these words? Can we hold on to this hope?
I mean, we held on to the hopes of the Nkrumahs, the Nyereres, the Abalewa, who wanted not nation states in Africa, but a civilizational state. One Africa from Cape to Cairo, Morocco to Malagasy, with his own high command, with his own economy, with one or two languages. That was a viable dream that African leaders have, and the crop of leaders that came behind that betrayed it. And the same thing happens. The earlier leadership that came in our country with all of this, the speech that we are actually even talking about, that too has been grossly betrayed by profit-seeking, money-seeking. I think one actually believes that we really need leaders with very strong sense of themselves. We've turned our backs from God. We've turned ourselves from the ancestors. We worship money. So what that speech has got to be, part of the curriculum, I think, of the country, part of the political education, so that we should actually maintain that dream actually in our minds and not forget what it is. Now, if I say, for instance, I'm an African caressed by African winds, trade and anti-trade, washed by her many rivers. In Soweto and in Sharville, in my mother's womb, I was a neighbor to a bullet. You look at it, only a few days ago, we saw how young people in 1976 were massacred. They bombed things in 1985 in Katlehong, where people's hands were blown. How many people have been executed in Mampuru prison? Take, for instance, in 1964, four brothers from the Vudingela, people. All of these things, don't these things weigh on the minds of the people that control the roads of state? To say, come up, wait a minute. We have got to do something. We have got to have a dialogue with ourselves, with our leaders, our traditional leaders, with our healers, with our religious people, with our bishops. Let the nation, get a program where we can have conversations, or we are going to have conversations in a manner in which one other forgotten person, I.B. Tabata, who was the leader of the non-European unity movement here in South Africa, said, when warm air rises, it meets with cold air. Condensation takes place, huge clouds, thunderstorms, that's natural. When in the center of the earth, molten lava expands and wants to escape to the surface, and we have a volcanic eruption, it's a natural phenomenon. But in society, when discontent simmers under the surface of society, people are mumbling and are angry. When it rips up onto the surface and people start taking action, we have a social revolution. That's a natural phenomenon. So we need to live and keep in touch with nature rather than betray it.
I am the grandchild of the warrior men and women that Hintsa and Sikukune led, the patriots that Qetshwayo and Mpepu took to the battle, the soldiers Mushweshwe and Gungunyane taught never to dishonor the cause of freedom. I wish we had more time to discuss this concept of freedom, but I guess we'll do that another day. Writer Pitika Ntuli, thank you very much for joining us this morning, poet and cultural expert.